To plant or not to plant? That seems to be the question every weekend when we're going through the springtime. You're worried about if those temperatures that week are going to get below freezing, or if we're going to get enough rain, or maybe even get too warm too quickly. Well, I think it's about that time of the year to begin planting, and we're going to see if really should we wait a couple more weeks, maybe into the start of May. Let's see what the science says and maybe what some of our plant experts have to say about planting for this time of the year. Well, one of the main factors for when you're planting some plants is you obviously need some rainfall. And a lot of the times we're dealing with drought conditions, especially through the heart of the country, but we've seen a lot of rain and a lot of moisture so far into the winter and spring so far. So a lot of the country is actually doing pretty well in terms of the drought conditions. If you move off towards the west, still dealing with a lot of drought for parts of Kansas and Oklahoma going through Texas, but parts of the biggest produce section of the country and parts of the Central Valley of California, no drought there for the first time in a long while. And then for the eastern half of the U.S., for parts of the Great Plains and the Great Lakes going into the Midwest and then into the South, we're doing very well in terms of drought conditions. We've seen a lot of rain so far this year, and then off for the East Coast as well, doing pretty well. So if you live in the eastern half of the United States, you're good in terms of drought conditions. If you live in California as well, you live in parts of the West, they've seen a lot of rain. And actually, as that snow begins to melt here, that snowpack will provide a lot of water as we go and get forward. So far we've seen a lot of rain this year, but what about this month and what can we expect coming up? Well, for Northwest Arkansas and for the River Valley, we saw a lot of rain in January, February, and March. April, though, so far has been relatively dry. We've seen less than ½ inch for a majority of the area so far. April normally has around 3 to 4 inches of rain. We're going to expect some rain this week, but we're going to need a little bit to catch up for this month's annual average total. But so far since January, we're looking at least 1.5 inches to 2 inches ahead of schedule in terms of rainfall. So on that ground, we're looking pretty good. But what can we expect this week? Well, we're going to be catching up to that April average. We're going to be getting around 1 to 2 to maybe even 3 inches widespread across the area for Northwest Arkansas and for the River Valley. For all of Arkansas, though, we are expecting some rain. So if you're planting this weekend, if you're going to go ahead and do it, you are going to see a little bit of moisture helping out those plants. Maybe a little bit too much if you have beds that don't have great drainage. So you want to keep that in mind as we get going for this week. Well, on top of the rain, you're also worried about the temperatures for when you're planting. You don't want to plant when you see a frost or a freeze in the forecast because it can do some serious damage to any of those sensitive crops. Well, as we move throughout this week, we're going to be below average. As we move into the first week or two into May as well, we're looking at, for the eastern half of the United States, again, below average. Well, below average means maybe temperatures, high temperatures into the 60s, lows maybe into the 40s, but could we potentially see a freeze or a frost coming our direction? Well, I think it's pretty unlikely. In general, it's rare to see frost or freezes this time of the year. We normally see our last freeze in late March going into early April for the River Valley, in mid-April for parts of Northwest Arkansas. The latest ever for Fayetteville was in early May. I don't think we're going to get that this time of year. And then for the River Valley as well, only a couple years ago, we saw a freeze that was in late April, April 21st of 2021. Again, we're past that mark. I don't think we're breaking any records this year. So in that case, I think we're looking good in terms of frost or freezes. So what do the experts say about when we should plant? Well, the University of Arkansas Department of Agriculture is saying if you want to plant in April, now is a great time to do any of those potted plants. Those house plants that you've had all winter long, maybe they've been neglected just a little bit. It's a good time to replant those, get them in a new pot, maybe get some new soil for those sort of things. Maybe even bring them outside to get them acclimated if you plan to leave them outside during the summertime. It's also a good time if you want to plant by seed any of those vegetables or any of those hardier plants. It's a little late to do so. You normally want to do that around a month before that last freeze is expected, so you might want to get ahead on that. But if you want to wait to May, that is a great time if you're just going to go to the store and you want to replant any of those already grown plants that you buy at a garden center. May is a great time to do so once that soil temperature gets between that 55 to 65 degree range. Then it's also a good time if you want to plant any of those sunflowers, any of those easier flowers. It's easy to do so once you get into May. So all in all, I think this weekend would be a good time to plant some of those plants. But if you want to wait until the start of May or maybe even a little bit longer, you're going to be in good condition because those cooler temperatures, at least the ones that are below freezing, are on the way out. I'm 5 News meteorologist Stephen Abshire.